In today's video, we're going to be breaking down Jalen Royals of Utah State. What are his strengths and weaknesses? How is he best utilized at the NFL level? What do we think we might be able to expect from him in fantasy? And where do we think he's drafted? Watch till the end of this video and you'll have a good idea. And now with most of these guys, we're not going to have their height and weight potentially until the combine or the pro days. But since he's participating in the Senior Bowl, we already have his height and weight. And so he's a little bit north of 5'11 and 210 pounds. This reasonably compares to DJ Moore's size, and I like to think of him as, a really bulky Jaden Reed, because Jaden Reed was 5'11", 191, and so he weighs substantially more than Reed, but that's kind of a good idea as to his build. Now, taking a look at his production, it is important to understand that he, played at Utah State, so the level of competition isn't insane, and does need to be factored here, and he didn't do anything as a true freshman or a sophomore. In fact, he didn't do anything as a freshman at all and only had 4 targets as a sophomore. But once he was given requisite volume, he immediately produced. And so in his true junior season, he had 99 targets, 70 receptions at a 70.7 reception percentage, 1,084 receiving yards, 15.5 yards per catch, and 15 receiving touchdowns. And that's a 79.6 PFF receiving grade. And he is a very good touchdown scorer. Now you might think, well, his senior statistics dipped. Did he have a poor season? Well, it's actually interesting. He only played in 7 games. And so he had 81 targets in 7 games, 55 receptions, a 67.9 reception percentage, 839 yards at 15.3 yards per catch. And so that's basically identical to his junior season, and 6 touchdowns in 7 games played. That's an 85% touchdowns per game percentage. And he upped his PFF receiving grade from a 79.6 to an 80.6. And so once again, it is important to contextualize that he's playing at Utah State, but his production, if he had played a full collegiate season as a senior, would have been absolutely ridiculous. Looking into some advanced stats, among draft-eligible FBS wide receivers with 70-plus targets, that was a sample size of 95 players here. Royals ran 280 routes this season, which was 96.6% of the team routes in the 7 games in which he played, and so we like the utilization. Looking into where he played 22.1% of the time in the slot and 77.9% of the time out wide, and so he is generally a versatile wide receiver, but more so a boundary, but he can play all over the field. Now, looking at his yards per out run, once again, it's important to understand that he did play at Utah State. But make no mistake, 3.00 yards per out run was 6 in the sample size. It doesn't matter if you're not facing elite competition. If you're not a good player and you get a lot of volume and you're playing a lot, you don't just walk into a 3.00 yards per out run. That is incredible production. Looking at his PFF receiving grade, his 80.6 is 19th among the sample size. I definitely think he's way better than the 19th best wide receiver here. Looking at his yak perception, his 7.9 was tied for 3rd in the sample size. He is insane after the catch. But look at his missed tackles forced. You might think 17, that's tied for 19th in the sample size. That's not incredible. That's in 7 games played. Every single player ahead of him had a substantially higher amount of games played. That's 2.42 missed tackles forced per game. That is otherworldly. And he is that good after the catch. And I'll break down what I see from him on film in a minute here. Looking at his contested catch percentage, it was actually in the 70s as a true junior. And his 53.3% is really good. That's 8 out of 15 this season. Now, I will say that I don't think he is going to be quite this good at the NFL level in contested catch situations. But, that is a good percentage for sure. But once again, I don't think he's going to be nearly that good at the NFL level, and I'll break down why in a little bit. Taking a look at his targets and targets per game, his 81 are fine, but that's 11.6 targets per game. That is elite target volume. Looking at his receptions and receptions per game, his 55 are fine, but that's 7.9 per game. That's really good. His yards and yards per game, 839 and 119.9 per game is great. And his 6 touchdowns in 7 games played is good for a 0.85 touchdowns per game rate, which is really, really good. And remember that as a true junior, he had 15. And so he is a very good touchdown scorer, and he can house it from anywhere on the field. Now, taking a look at his ability to beat man in zone specifically, as well as his grade in the slot and on screens, as well as his first downs caught, his PFF grade versus man of 77.7 is tied for 30th. He is very good in man coverage. His yards per out run versus man of 3.62 is tied for eighth. He is very good. He separates quite well on all three levels of the field. His PFF grade versus zone of 77.4 is tied for 27th. He's pretty good against zone coverage too. His yards per out run versus zone of 2.86 is 19th. That's pretty good production. And he's a very balanced wide receiver. And in terms of his ability to beat man and zone, his PFF grade on screens of 87.1 was 25th. He is very good at following his blockers. He has insane burst. I'll tell you who it reminds me of in a minute, but don't get carried away when I mention his name. In terms of his PFF grade in the slot, his 89.3 score was seventh in the sample size. That is incredible. He is very good in the short area of the field. He has fantastic agility, snap down. He is going to be dominant when he plays in the slot at the NFL level. And his first downs caught of 34 was tied for 60th. But remember that he only played in 7 games. He would have been among the leaders in the sample size that I mentioned earlier if he had played a full collegiate season. Moving on to the grades, remember that he's 5'11", 210 pounds, verified at the Senior Bowl. He is a senior out of Utah State. My evaluation, I think he's worthy of a late first-round pick. My comp for him, I think he's Jaden Reedish with shades of Chase and Neighbors after the catch. Now, before you go crazy saying, oh my goodness, he mentioned Chase and Neighbors, that I don't think he's going to be as impactful as those guys at the NFL level. I just see specific things about his game that really does remind me of those players. And so with Jaden Reed, it's that he has a very good tackle breaking ability, amazing contact balance, very good vision in the open field. He excels in terms of following his blockers. He reminds me of Chase. When you see him run a tunnel screen, the immediate burst up the field, and also on go routes, his vertical burst and separation, the way he can stack cornerbacks really does remind me of Chase. And the Neighbors part is when he runs hitch routes, for instance, you'll see this with Neighbors all the time. He will spin suddenly, either left or right. It's impossible to tell which way he's going to go, and then immediately burn down the field, break tackles, maximize yardage. It is special. And so once again, I don't think that he is going to be Jamar Chase or Malik Neighbors, but you absolutely on film see that level of ability after the catch. In terms of my official grade, I gave him an 86 out of 100. I think he is a great receiving prospect. And so his analytics, weren't incredible in terms of he was playing at Utah State, sure, and he didn't do anything as a freshman or sophomore. But when he was actually given the ability to perform, he performed ridiculously well. In terms of his short route running, I gave him a 5 out of 5. He runs a very good hitch route. Like I mentioned a minute ago, he's like Neighbors after the hitch, where he'll spin out, break tackles, maximize yardage. He runs a very good speed out, where his snap down, in terms of the angle that he achieves, it's flat. It's essentially a 90-degree angle. It is quite good. You'll also see him on shallow crosses, and especially on tunnel screens and just screens in general. He follows his blockers quite well, and he has immediate burst and separates from trailing defenders. Now, in terms of his medium routes, I gave him a 4.5 out of 5. He runs a very good 10-yard out. Just like with his speed out, he achieves a sharp angle. He comes back to the football to make sure that the defender can't undercut it, and it's very good. Now, he runs a very good dig route as well. I did see a rep where he didn't correctly read the drop depth of the cornerback, and so he kind of had to alter his route, and it really took him out of the play. And so I didn't give him a quite perfect score because I did see some wasted movement, but the potential is absolutely there. Now, in terms of his deep route running, I gave him a 5 out of 5. He separates incredibly well. He stacks easily. He runs a very good slot fade, just like with Malik Neighbors. He runs a very good go route, just like with Jamar Chase. And you will see him break tackles on go routes. It's very reminiscent of Chase in that regard. But once again, you'll see with the catching and catching traffic that I don't think he's that level of prospect by any stretch of the imagination, but he's very similar specifically with those traits. Now, in terms of his double moves, I gave him a 4.5 out of 5 because he has the agility, change of direction, deceleration to run these at an insanely high level. And I did see some very good reps, but I did see a rep, for instance, where he was a little bit clunky and he didn't sell it very well. And so he therefore wasn't able to get any good separation there. But the potential is there. In terms of his releases, when he's given off coverage, his footwork is nearly flawless. He bursts off the line. That does remind me of Malik Neighbors and his ability to instantly get off. And I really didn't see him get pressed at the collegiate level. And so I was really worried that he wouldn't be able to do it, because if you don't see somebody do it, you can't really just give somebody the benefit of the doubt in most cases. But in the Senior Bowl practice a day or two ago, he put somebody on their butt in press man coverage. He is very physical, and that is exactly what I needed to see. And given that while he is only 5'11", so he's not the tallest guy, he's 210 pounds. That is very bulky for somebody that's 5'11". He is going to be physical enough to beat press man coverage at the NFL level. In terms of his speed, I think that he's going to be in the 4.33 to 4.38 range. And so I gave him a 9 out of 10. He easily stacks vertically. You'll see it. And especially after the catch, zoom. Trailing defenders, they just don't have a chance. In terms of his acceleration, I gave him a 9 out of 10. It isn't quite that of Jamar Chase or Malik Neighbors, but it is very, very good. And you will see that if you watch highlights or film. It's incredible. In terms of his deceleration, it is nearly flawless. I did see a little bit of wasted movement on a comeback, but the majority of his hitches, his comebacks, and his curls are very, very good in terms of his snap down ability. And he has such an ability to burn past you that he is going to strike fear in defenders. In terms of his agility, as soon as he gets the ball in his hands, he is a running back, essentially. He will juke you. He'll break tackles through you. His contact balance is quite good. And so in tight spaces, in the sense of make you miss in phone booth ability, he has that. He can juke you out of your shoes. His change of direction, he can stop on a dime, change course. It is incredible. Now, in terms of his catching, he did have 8 drops in the past 2 seasons. And so he does have concentration drops at a relatively high level. And so that is an absolute ding that I think is necessary with him. And his catch in traffic, while he did have over a 70% contested catch rate as a junior and a 53% as a senior, and I do see him get moved off of his spot and bullied a little bit in contested catch situations. So I don't think he's going to be quite as dominant as players like Jamar Chase or Neighbors in that regard, especially Jamar Chase and his dominant ability there. And so that is one of the biggest things I have for him is, despite being a relatively sturdy guy, he does get bullied from time to time. But make no mistake, he can make highlight level contested catches. It's just the consistency isn't quite as good as I would like to see. And I don't project it to be particularly impressive at the NFL level. Now, in terms of his run after catch, straight 5 out of 5. He'll juke you out of your shoes. He'll break tackles. He's very good at following blockers. He has incredible spatial awareness. He is awesome. In terms of his dog factor, he has no issue with contact. As soon as the ball's in his hands, he is the most dangerous player on the field. And at the NFL level, he will be one of the most dangerous players on the field, no matter which team he goes to. Basically, if they don't have somebody like CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, Chase, or Neighbors, he is going to be the most dangerous guy on the field in a run after catch ability. And the touchdown production, 15 in one season, and then 6 and 7 games played as a true senior. That is elite touchdown production, and I think that will translate. In terms of his analytics, I did give him a 4 out of 10. Now, you might be thinking, okay, well, once he was given the requisite volume, he immediately produced. Well, it is important to understand that once again, he was at Utah State. The level of competition wasn't particularly impressive, and he didn't do anything as a true freshman or sophomore. But the profile is incredibly good despite the lack of production in 2 of the 4 collegiate seasons. Now, in terms of his projected draft capital, I gave him a 3.5 out of 5. He's projected some places as a 3rd round pick and some places as a late 2nd round pick. I think that he has the potential to move up into the early to mid 2nd round potentially if he has a very good combine, which I think he will, and if he performs well at the Senior Bowl, which from what I've seen in some of the practice reps is really impressive. And so I do think that's going to go up, but for now, I'm just going to give him a 3.5 out of 5, which is high 3rd, low 2nd round draft capital. In terms of his XZ and slot ability, straight 5 out of 5. Like I said, in terms of off coverage in the slot or as the Z, his footwork is impeccable. He bursts off the line, creates instant separation. And as an X, I wasn't really sure because once again, he wasn't really pressed in the games in which I watched in terms of his all 22. But in the Senior Bowl, he straight up pushed somebody straight onto their butt with very good power and then bursted for a free catch, obviously, because it was a one-on-one scenario. But I'm not worried in any way, shape, or form. Now, in terms of my worries for him, I do worry that, once again, he's not going to be dominant in contested catch situations, and he does have some focus drops, and the level of competition is a valid concern. But what I've seen on film will translate at the NFL level, and he has a profile that I particularly like, which is somebody with a lot of positional versatility and is amazing after the catch. Now, where does Royals rank among his contemporaries at wide receiver in the 25 class, at least the ones in which I've graded so far, as well as the 2024 class stacked on top of each other? Well, the only elite prospects that I've graded in the past 2 seasons are Malik Neighbors and Travis Hunter. In terms of great receivers, you have your Harrison Jr.'s, your McMillans, Odunze's, BTJ's. I have Royals below BTJ but above Luther Burden III. And then you have your next tier of AD Mitchell, McConkey, and Igbuka. With Burden, I give the edge to Royals because I don't think that Burden is going to be able to play as an X. I don't think he has the long speed necessary. He has the burst. He's very good after the catch, breaks tackles, jukes people out of their shoes. And so that is very similar to that of Jalen Royals. But Jalen Royals has the speed to stack vertically and is going to be able to beat press man coverage on the outside, as well as dominate in the slot and the Z position like I think Burden will. And so I give the edge to Royals. And Burden wins in terms of the production for the most part, because as a true freshman, he didn't give us nothing. And obviously had a dominant sophomore season, unlike Royals, who didn't do anything through his first 2 collegiate seasons. Plus, Burden was doing it in the SEC, whereas Royals really just didn't play anybody particularly impressive for the most part. But in terms of the max upside, I do think that Royals has more because his positional versatility is better. But once again, they're very similar players in the sense of their yards after catch ability in terms of their tackle breaking, their ability to read blockers in the screen game. They are quite good. But at this current moment in time, I have Royals as the wide receiver 3, at least in the terms of how he grades with this specific prospect model in which I use. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Major Jack, and Infamy MTG. If you would like to become a member, I'm going to leave a link in the comment section. As far as what you'll gain, you'll get access to a private Discord server. I'm going to have a real life and fantasy football chat where we talk about real life NFL news. Any questions you might have will be answered in the real life NFL chat. And as far as the fantasy football chat, we'll talk about what's happening in the fantasy world. I'll give you team reviews, give you optimal roster construction based on your specific league settings, trades you can make to strengthen your roster, buying and selling points, specifically price points for various players based on your positions of need. I'll give you a special shout out, obviously, on all of these videos. You'll get early access to videos. You'll be part of private live streams that are not available to regular YouTube members. And you will also have the ability to suggest videos specifically for you on Patreon. I've already made one on Isaac Rendo as per request by one of my Patreon members. And so once again, if you would like to join, the link is going to be in the comment section. Thanks.